So if anyone would have told me even a year ago that I would be standing up here in a church talking about my relationship with God, I would have thought they were crazy. Up until last fall, God didn't really have a place in my life. I don't even think that I believed in him at all. Even growing up, we went to church on the holidays we were supposed to, Christmas, Easter, but God wasn't really part of our family growing up. So as soon as I was old enough to stop going to church and my mom stopped making me, I never went back. I think on some level, I always wanted to have a belief in God. I wanted to believe there was someone up there watching over me, but I had never personally experienced anything to make me believe that. I'd look around at the world and think, if so many people are suffering, if people are dying, how can there be a God? I looked at my father, who was an alcoholic, and thought, if there's a God, he wouldn't let me grow up like this. I never took the time to read the Bible and understand who God really was. But I made up my own definitions and set my own expectations, and when he didn't meet them, I used that as my justification that he was made up. I threw myself into adulthood at a pretty young age. I was 19 when I had my son. Younger than I had planned, but we had been together since we were 14, so I figured we could handle it. 4 years later, we had our daughter and got married. As we planned our wedding, I purposely planned it outside because I thought, if there is a God, he must judge me pretty harshly for having children before I got married. And I didn't really want him as part of my wedding day or part of my marriage. And 2 years later, we were divorced. That same year, I met somebody else, and we fast-tracked our relationship. We fell in love quick, and we moved in together that same year. After being together for 3.5 years, we made the move from Illinois to Indiana, and we got engaged. Again, I went one step further. Besides an outdoor wedding, we went for a destination. We were planning one in Mexico, trying to keep God away from it. The move to Indiana was tough for us. It came with financial stress. It came with less time for each other. We missed our home. We missed our friends, and things were not going really well. So last fall, I suffered one of the most traumatic blows of my life when I found out that he had been unfaithful. We separated for a bit as we tried to figure out what to do, but I have 2 children, he has 1, and we figured there was way too much at stake, and there was no way we could split up, so we tried to work through it. It was tough. My resentments were high, but we were working on it. And then last fall, out of nowhere, he walked out on my children and I. There are no words to convey that day and the devastation that hit. For my 2 children, for me, for his son, I had no idea where life was headed. So my kids and I, we took a couple days off of work and school. We laid around and cried together and tried to figure out how to put the pieces of our life back together. When the next week started on Monday, I told him we had to be brave, we had to get up, and we had to keep moving one day at a time. So I took him to school. I went back home, and I went to bed, and I cried. I sobbed. I wasn't eating. I wasn't drinking. I was completely lost. I had no idea how I was going to go on. I wanted to give up. I didn't know where to turn. So I figured I'll try the one thing I've never tried before. So I hit my knees, and I prayed. Next to my bed in my bedroom, I cried, and I begged God to please help. I begged him to come into my life and take over. I just said, I give up. I can't do this on my own anymore. That went on for a few minutes, and I got up, honestly not feeling that much different, but really hoping something would change. I pulled myself together. I got in the car, and I went to work. And on my way to work, I heard Rachel Platten's Fight song. And I cried again and tried to believe that I still had fight left in me and that I could get through this. When I got home from work that night, I opened my mailbox, and there was a postcard from Suncrest Christian Church, and the top said, "Come find your fight song." And I knew it right there. That was it, That was God. That was the first time I personally experienced him right there in my driveway. I probably looked like a fool. I was crying, holding a postcard, but I promised him I'd go to church. I said, I know you're here. I'll go. It took me a couple weeks to still muster up the courage. I was pretty nervous. I hadn't been to church since I was a kid, and I didn't know what to expect. 2 weeks later, when I showed up, it was week 1 of Fight Song series. There he was again. It was his timing. He made sure I showed up at the right time. I immediately began looking forward to church. The messages were speaking to me. They were changing me. They were giving me a strength that I didn't know was possible. And they were giving me a clear understanding for the first time in my life of who God was. And I found comfort in his love for me. But I still had real-life obstacles that I did not know how to face. I needed a new home. We had to move again. I needed a new full-time job. I didn't know where to find it. And within 2 weeks, both of those were provided for me. Not just a home, but a home on our same street that was not even on the market yet, that was being renovated, a full-time job and childcare for the days that I didn't have it. And I knew it. I knew that was him. I started to feel closer to him every day. During all of this, my 12-year-old son continually would ask me what made his stepdad leave, and I didn't have an answer for him. He thought I was hiding some piece of the puzzle, that if I told him it would make it make sense. He went to church with his father one weekend, and he came home, and he said, "Mom, I know what happened to him." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he didn't have God in his heart, so Satan started picking at it, and he got in." And I looked at him, and I said, "If you believe that's what happened, then what we need to do is pray. Pray for him, and pray that God comes into his life." 2 weeks later, he walked through the doors of this church. I don't know how to explain what that was like, because he had been on a reckless path, had shown no remorse for leaving us. And he walked through here, and when I asked him why, he said, "I don't know how to explain that to you, but last weekend, it was like God reached into my chest, grabbed my heart, and said, 'Let me take over for a while.'" And that right there, that was the biggest affirmation of faith and God's power and the power of prayer that I could have ever hoped to witness. And I admit, since last fall, all those big things happening, the ways that God moves in my life every day, sometimes they're really little, they're small in comparison, but I know that he's there, and I think he did that on purpose. I was in such a lost place last fall, and I didn't believe, and he gave me clear signs so I would know he was here, and he was with me, and I could trust him completely. And it's not always easy. A couple weeks ago, with all that rain, I got water in my basement. My hours got cut at work, so I might have to figure something else out again. I currently have a family member in the hospital fighting for her life. But during those tough times, I'm reminding myself that I denied God almost all of my life. I didn't believe in him. I never gave him credit for the good in my life. I always blamed him for everything bad. And the second that I cried out for help, the second that I needed him, he was there waiting. All I had to do was open up my heart to him. So, although my future is still uncertain, I have no idea where everything is headed. I know there will be struggles, big ones and small ones, but I'm no longer anxious about it because I know God's by my side through all of it. And I've realized that's everything.